I'm Kim Adamski, HIV prevention specialist at the Hartford Gay and Lesbian Health Collective. The Health Collective is located at 1841 Broad Street in Hartford, Connecticut. We offer services like STD testing, sexual health visits, STD treatment. We have a dental program, and we do education and sometimes just fun programming for the community. Tonight's Zoom discussion is part of our LGBTQ family building series. If you were here last night, we had the UConn fertility folks on talking about IVF. And today we have a representative from the UConn Adoption Assistance Program. So Joselyn, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, my name is Joselyn Benoit, and I'm a social worker at UConn's Adoption Assistance Program. We're located at the Health Center in Farmington. I have been working in the field of adoption for 18 years. Oh my gosh, for a private agency for 5 years, doing mostly international adoptions and birth parent counseling. And I've been with AAP for 13 years at UConn. So that's me. And should I just keep going, jump into what I want to say?
Yeah, you can talk about the Adoption Assistance Program or whatever you want to start with.
Perfect. So I just wanted to say that adoption is an awesome way to build a family. As folks know, there are lots of children available for adoption in the state of Connecticut right here. International adoption, of course, is an option, but it's probably a less common adoption, probably I'm going to say in the last 12 years, just because of, international relations, travel, international treaties, things like that kind of govern overseas adoptions. And some countries just couldn't put various policies and practices into place up to the standards basically of the US. So there are still countries who do international adoptions. That is not what I've been doing the last 13 years. So I couldn't speak a ton on that. However, I could give you some resources as to where to look for some of that information. I could definitely do that. I could send that to Kim after. That's not something I pulled for tonight, but I could definitely send that to you for after.
Okay, yeah, and when I upload this, I will be posting all of the links and everything that we discuss in the description of the video.
Perfect. Awesome. So, one of the things a lot of people wonder, like, how do I get started? How do I do an adoption? The program I work for is a post-adoption program, but I'm fairly familiar with the process of adoption because that's what I did for many years. That's where I began my career. Everybody needs a home study, right? So that's the first thing everyone needs to do an adoption. Mm-hmm. And before you do that, you really want to hear from a professional kind of what is the process? How long does it take? These are kind of some of the common questions. Am I licensable? Is my home licensable? So DCF has a really great section on their website about frequently asked questions. And some of the questions, actually, one of the questions I was reading is, what are the various requirements for a family? Who can adopt? Things like that. Do you have to be married, divorced? Is that okay? Can you be a same-sex couple? All these questions are on here. And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. Can single individuals adopt? Yes, they can. How long do you have to wait? Again, various questions, various answers. This is a really good resource for families who have a couple of, just kind of want to know what some of the basic questions are. And then to go to an open house, basically DCF has 14 area offices 14 regions. They've combined a couple of offices. But basically the way to start is to really go to an open house, and they're all virtual meetings right now. Now, if you want to be an adoptive family, a foster family, a guardianship family, or a mentor through DCF, the process is all the same. Like, they all start the same. You have to go to an open house and you have to get licensed. Like, your home and your family have to get licensed. So basically you just pick one of these meetings and you say, okay, I'm going to go to that. You can go to whichever, obviously right now it doesn't matter what town, but if you want to pick a virtual meeting that's near the town you live in, there's probably going to be a representative who works in that office who could potentially be working with your family in the future regarding the process, the adoption process. After you do a virtual meeting, you have to do I believe it's 10 weeks of class. It's usually meets 2 nights a week. I don't know if I believe they're doing them virtual right now, but it's an incredible amount of information, and it's really everything you need to know from the beginning to end, what to expect. It's a long class, but it's a really good class. You'll get a lot of information, especially if you're not parenting now. There's some basic parenting things in there as well, which is really good. And then, some families say, "Oh, I don't know if I want to adopt from DCF. DCF is maybe they're scary, or I've heard really bad things about DCF, or,
Actually, yeah, I had a question because a lot of
Sure.
people say you can't get an infant from DCF, and that's
Okay.
why a lot of people might not choose to adopt through DCF. Is that true? To what extent?
Sure.
Can you talk on that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So it's not true. You definitely can get an infant from DCF. I've had several friends actually who've adopted infants through DCF. So basically, when you have your home study written, there's a section in your home study that actually says like child preferred. And so you can literally put, well, you're going to ask your social worker to put in the home study everything from age you're open to, race and ethnicity, gender, if they're part of a sibling group, do you want an open adoption? You're going to talk through all those things. And so basically when a child becomes available, there's like it's called a teaming process where your social worker and others will present all the home studies that they have that matches who this child is that's available and who are the families that's looking for a child that meets that criteria. And then you may or may not get matched basically with that child. And you'll always be presented with the information and you have the right to say, yes, we want to go forward, or no, we don't want to go forward with that placement. The reason infants are available through DCF is one, safe haven is one way that infants are available. The more common way is that birth parents have had previous children removed from their care and have been placed for adoption. And, women will continue to get pregnant. And if there's some concern, about, their prenatal care, that maybe they've tested positive for drugs, alcohol during a prenatal visit, or if the baby is born exposed, something like that, then there would definitely be infants available, and that does happen.
Okay, and can you quick define safe haven?
So safe haven is a law in most states, but in Connecticut, that a woman or any interested caring party, but it's typically the biological mother, can bring a child to a couple different locations like a fire station, police station, emergency room, no questions asked, and basically entrust that baby into their care until DCF can get there and find a placement for that child. I believe it has to be within the first 10 days of life. Like there is a time frame. I should look that up. I can get
I heard
that
there was like a loophole and you could like bring your 10-year-old or something if you didn't want them.
Yeah, right. No, it's really for newborn infants, really. That was the intent of the law. Yeah, right. So DCF works with licensed child placement agencies throughout the state. So even though you may not want to work directly with DCF, there are agencies that still help DCF place their children. Like DCF could never place all the kids on their own without help of private licensed child placing agencies. So this is a list. Unfortunately, this is on their website. It's an outdated list, but these agencies are still around. These just may not be the directors, unfortunately. But these are local child placing agencies who help DCF place their children. So some of these agencies do private newborn infant adoption, do international adoption, and place DCF children. So like Family and Children's Agency in Norwalk, for example, they do all three of those types of adoptions. The Village, I don't believe they do international, but they do private domestic newborn infant adoption, and they do DCF adoption. Jewish Family Services does all three. CRI used to have a Korea program as well as private newborn infant and DCF adoptions. So those are the ones that are standing out to me. All of the rest, I believe, just do DCF adoptions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, as far as LGBTQ couples are concerned, if places are like work with DCF, are they required to take LGBTQ couples? Are all private adoption organizations required to, or does that vary based on the organization?
You know, I would say that they don't. I mean, I'm not saying that individual workers may not discriminate, but I would say in general, the practices, no, we don't discriminate. Single people can adopt, same-sex couples can adopt.
The only reason I ask is I've heard like random news
Mhm.
stories about like, you know, people saying this religious organization won't let me in my
Yeah.
sort of thing. But I don't know
I mean,
how widespread that is or anything.
Sure. You know, I don't see Catholic Charities on this list, which is interesting because they definitely do private newborn infant adoption. I think they might not place DCF children. Now, the agency I worked with, Wide Horizons for Children for years, we did not place DCF children. We only did international and only counseled birth parents and placed newborn private infants. So the only problem or barrier I could foresee is if someone does a private newborn infant adoption where the birth parents are involved in the process and selecting a family. So
Gotcha.
I have had that, like maybe once of all the birth parents I've counseled specifically say, you know, I want a married couple. I want, you know, the family to have a house or, you know, that type of thing. Or a married couple, male, female married couple, for example. But I have absolutely had birth parents choose same-sex couples, single parents, you know, for their child. Absolutely.
Okay. Now that we're on the topic of birth parents, can you tell me a little bit more about like how birth parents are or are not involved and how the relationship is managed, if there's any relationship?
Sure. So, you know, once a child comes into care, be it through DCF, I mean, the process is very different if it's a private newborn infant adoption. If an agency is counseling the birth mother, the child is born in Connecticut, they can sign paperwork, you know, within 72 hours after they're discharged from the hospital. We used to wait a little bit longer just to make sure that that was really their decision. And then a judge has 21 days to hear the case for termination of parental rights. And that's voluntary termination, right? So this is a woman saying, I can't parent for whatever reason. I'm choosing this family. I'm choosing this agency to help them, you know, place my child, and I'm signing. You know, when DCF is involved, it's very different. They're typically, you know, taking parental rights involuntarily. So the court process can be longer. Now, if you adopt from DCF, there's almost always a longer legal risk period. There is always a legal risk period in adoption. 21 days, if a birth parent changes their mind, 21 days is a very long time, right? To have a child in your care potentially. So it's that part is tricky about adoption, that unless the birth parent's rights are already terminated, there is legal risk involved.
Now, how often would you say that it doesn't work out before 21 days is up? In your experience, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I had one birth mother change her mind. Mm-hmm. We kind of knew she was on the fence. And so we actually asked one of our foster families, like a family, for example, who was adopting from China. And we knew they weren't going to get a referral for like 6 months, for example. So they were licensed. And we said, would you be willing to foster this baby for 3 weeks until we can go to court? The birth mother called me and she said, within that time frame, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think I can do this. She absolutely has a right to do that. Mm-hmm. She said, meet me. I said, okay, I'll get the baby from the foster family. I'll meet you at the office, like in a neutral place. And she never showed.
Huh.
So, that ultimately the child was adopted by the family she chose. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it kind of varies.
Gotcha.
So birth parent roles going forward, like once parental rights are terminated, adoptive families have the right to say what kind of relationship they want with the biological family. Do they want contact? Do they not want contact? Do they want, and contact could be anything from letters and photos to visits to,
yeah, I actually knew somebody. I knew somebody who had given up a child for adoption and went to visit them in their city, like 3 hours away, like twice a year for like a day, and they seemed happy enough with the arrangement. So
yeah, I mean, it really. We as social workers should never promise adoptive families or birth families privacy or secrecy. Like it's not good for the child, and it's really not. It's just not realistic in today's day and age with social media, but if there is some concern about, substance abuse with like an upcoming visit or, even if you have an open adoption agreement, when I'm talking about the adoptive family, there is a caveat, a clause in all open adoption agreements that say you, adoptive parents, you have the right to say whether or not this can happen based on your child's best interest. Mm-hmm. Like if you feel like it's not safe, they're not sober, they're not adhering to your wishes or respecting your wishes or your boundaries, things like that. You have the right to say this can't happen. We'll try again next year or, what have you. So open adoption agreements are just that. They're agreements. They're not, legally binding. They're in a file, but, it's highly unlikely that anyone is going to take you to court and say they didn't uphold this. And because the judge will say, well, right here, it says, if the adoptive parents didn't feel like it was safe and it wasn't in the child's best interest, then they don't have to do it. Mm-hmm. So that is something to consider.
Now, on that topic, obviously there's different levels that you can have of involvement of the birth parent. How do different people approach talking about their child's adoption with their child?
Sure. So we, like on the PostAdopt side, we would recommend you get very comfortable with the word adoption, that you use it when they're pre-verbal if you can, so that if you get a child who's pre-verbal, obviously young enough, that you just get really comfortable with that, and for them to know their story very early on. I mean, if the child ever spent any time in foster care, they probably know,
right,
that they've had multiple homes or placements or things like that. But the adoptive family, has to get comfortable with the language they use. I've heard all people use all kinds of language, like your first mommy, your first family, your tummy mommy, you know, all kinds of things. It's really whatever. There's no right or wrong. We just say, make sure you talk about it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Make sure you're open to questions and wondering from your child. Make sure that you always provide a safe space for them to be curious and kind of non-judgmental. Basically, children wouldn't be available for adoption if something bad or unexpected didn't happen to somebody, right?
Mhm.
Um, you know, women who have enough money and have enough support and have access to healthcare, and have a good job, they don't place their children for adoption, right?
Right.
It's the family, it's the women who unfortunately don't have support, don't feel
Mhm.
like they could do it, have a mental health or substance abuse issue, something like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we talk a lot about people adopting infants. How frequently do people adopt infants compared to school-age kids or teenagers in your experience?
Um, hmm. I would say the large majority of kids available for adoption are probably over 5.
Mhm.
It's usually school age kids who are available. I can get you those numbers too.
Okay.
Because there is a chart
Mhm.
on Child Information Gateway. I can get that for you. Numbers and ages. I can do that.
Mhm. Awesome. Okay, so
Yep.
what are some challenges then for adopting older children, school age kids, teenagers?
Sure. Yeah. Obviously the biggest challenge is going to be what they've experienced without you, right?
Mhm.
So, what have they been exposed to? Um, how chaotic has their life been? What have they witnessed? How many placements have they had that have been unstable? And all that will ultimately impact probably their learning, their development, their mental health, their ability to attach and bond and
Mhm.
say, is this really my family I'm going to stay with? Because I've been with 3 other of these families
Mhm.
and they all said I was going to stay and I didn't.
Right.
The longer they're not with you, unfortunately, the more baggage they're going to have.
Now, what
Um,
resources are available for these families?
yeah, sure. So us, the Adoption
Mhm.
Assistance Program. And it's important to know too that we are a voluntary program. So families, sometimes families say, "Oh, I adopted from DCF. I can't go back to them. I don't want them to know I'm having a problem, or I don't want my previous agency to know that we're struggling, or that my kid kicked my wall, what have you." So we're voluntary. You can say, yes, I want your help. No, I don't want your help. We can give you referrals, and you could say, I don't like those. Give me more. And that's completely fine. You can come to us once or 10 times. Maybe your child is having a specific struggle in school. And we come to a PPT with you, which is basically a school meeting where you say, my child is struggling with their learning, struggling with their behaviors in school. We need to get them more support. So we do a lot of advocacy in school. We have a lot of therapy resources. One of the other things we do is that we train mental health professionals. We do this training. It's a 72-hour training. We do it the academic year. We start in October and we end in May. And it's for already, licensed clinical social workers, LPCs, people who are already working in the mental health fields, but they want the adoption lens.
Mhm.
And so this is our, Connecticut has been doing it since it used to be at the UConn School of Social Work. Now we teach it. I'm trained in that. Us at UConn Health are. And we add therapists every year to our list of people that we can refer to who've gotten this training. It's called Training and Adoption Competencies. It's evidence-based. They take an exam at the end. So
Mhm.
yeah, we have, I'm gonna go to I can share my screen again, I think.
Okay.
Go to my other thing that I had on here. But yeah, so this is our program. We have a ton of resources here. This is the TAC information. We have a lending library. We have a ton of great articles on here. Um, and then we also have a therapist directory as well, that is on, we actually do two websites. We have, this is the Adoption Community Network. We also house this website, and this is a therapist directory that we have.
Mhm.
And there's just a little blurb about each one, what insurance they take. That's huge for families because some families maybe will only have Husky through, because if
Uh-huh.
you adopt a child through DCF, your child basically comes with health insurance. They will have Husky, which is great.
Yeah.
And so it's really important for us to not just recruit therapists who are adoption competent, but also recruit therapists who take Husky,
Mhm.
because that's the insurance that families are going to have. The other thing to know about our program is that we have funds to help families access services not covered by their insurance. So say you want to get a neuropsych for your child and they don't take insurance, you can apply to our program. We have paid for tons of neuropsychs. We believe that it's very important for families to kind of have a starting point. Without a great evaluation, you could be spinning your wheels trying this, that, and the other, and it's really not treating the problem unless you know what the problem is.
Mhm.
So that's something, and those, neuropsychs can be like $3,000 to $5,000. So that is something that families can help, we can help with. Um, we do a ton of advocacy in schools. We pay for a lot of kind of non-traditional therapies, or help pay for a lot of non-traditional therapies like therapeutic horseback riding, art therapy. A kid who has attention problems would do really great in karate, for
Mhm.
example, but karate is not covered by insurance and it can be expensive. So that's, another thing we pay for a lot. And then, if your child's adopted through DCF, that you'll probably get a monthly subsidy. So that's the other thing. People are like, oh, is adoption super expensive? Actually, if you adopt from DCF, it's free. It doesn't cost a dime.
Mhm.
In fact, they probably give you a small stipend each month.
Yeah,
And
actually, I
we,
used to work, I worked with a family in upstate New York. I was doing casework for insurance, and they had adopted a family of three or three siblings is what I mean, in Washington State, and Washington sent them money every single month to
yeah,
help support the kids.
yeah. The thing I will say that is a teeny bit tricky when you move somewhere else. So Connecticut will give you a subsidy and Husky. We've had families who, I mean, you don't have to stay in Connecticut. If you want to go somewhere else, that's fine. Once you have a finalized adoption, that child is legally yours and you're free to move
Mhm.
wherever you choose. But if you move to, let's say, Florida, for example, we have a lot of families who move to Florida, you will get the equivalent of what Husky is in Florida.
Okay.
And so there's no way that Connecticut can guarantee what the equivalent of Husky in Florida will pay for, right?
Okay.
So that's a little bit tricky. We have had some families be really upset that you said I would get Husky. Well, you do get Husky, but Husky's in Connecticut, right? And we work really hard to get providers to take Husky, but
Mhm.
whatever Florida care is, there may not be people in Florida advocating, for example, for
Right.
mental health professionals to take that insurance. So that
Mhm.
can be a little tricky. Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, I mean, I like to think that LGBTQ couples are pretty well accepted as good parents, et cetera, et cetera. Do you ever
Yeah.
run into any misconceptions either by gay, lesbian, trans, et cetera, couples about adoption for themselves, or from other people about LGBTQ couples?
I mean, it's been a long time since I've placed children.
Uh-huh.
So because I've been doing post-adopt work for 13 years, like I said.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the kind of typical stereotypes of, oh, I want my child to be raised by a male and female married couple because that's how
Mhm.
I was raised or what have you. But I don't,
Hey, that's good. That's good.
yeah,
You can't think of anything.
I really can't. I mean,
Awesome. I
yeah,
love to hear it.
yeah. And I think, you know, I don't know. And I mean, this could be wrong, but I think, LGBTQ families have often already had a lot of their own struggles in life in the sense of people accepting them and who they are. So frankly, I think they're a little bit more open-minded and compassionate to the children that need homes
Mhm.
because they know what struggle is. They know
Mhm.
what people not accepting them
Mhm.
feels like. Maybe they've had people reject them or families kick them out, right?
Right.
And so maybe they would be a better resource for our kids
Mhm.
because they have more understanding, you
Yeah.
know.
Okay, so what are some common questions you get just in general that we haven't covered from adopted families or from
Um,
adopted children?
Sure. I mean, a lot of people are right now concerned about future contact, like after the child turns age
Oh,
18. So Connecticut just passed a law that adoptees have the right to their original birth certificate once they
okay.
turn 18. So they will, some families or even adoptive families may not know, if you adopted from foster care and the child was removed, you may not know their biological parents' names. That would be part of a sealed record. But once they're 18, they can get that information. So now we, need to figure out how do we support all these young people or older people who said, "Oh my gosh, now I can finally find, you know, the woman who gave birth to me or hear my story," because with each placement, some of your story gets lost, right? And so um, that's something that we have to do a better job at of preparing families for that, I think, to not expect privacy and secrecy forever. Like it's not going to happen. And we probably need more counselors to work with birth parents for the reunions because they are the ones who haven't had any relationship or contact with the child or the adoptive family, or maybe a social service agency in a really long time, right? Um,
Right,
so
yeah.
that's one
Okay.
of the biggies recently. Yeah.
Mhm. Now, does the Adoption Assistance Program field questions specifically from adoptive families, or do like adopted kids, like either as older teenagers or adults, talk
Yeah.
to you all too?
Yeah, absolutely. We work with a lot of young adult adoptees. Um, Unfortunately, this is another problem in Connecticut, and I'm sure it's not unique to Connecticut. But these kiddos, they need a commitment for a lifetime, and some of them can be really hard. And I hate to say it, but I sometimes I think when money's involved, it's really hard to tease out people's true ulterior, true motives. Some families may say, oh, the money ends and sorry, you can't stay here anymore. And unfortunately, that happens. Um, yeah, so we do work with a lot of young adult adoptees who have
Man, that's so
nobody, and it's
sad.
very sad. It's very sad. It's terrible. It shouldn't
Mhm.
happen, but
Yeah,
it
I can't
it
imagine.
happens. It happens.
Hmm. Well, it's good
Um,
that you guys are there. Do you like usually
yeah,
like refer them to resources, therapy, stuff
Yeah.
like that?
Yep. Yep. We
Gotcha.
do. A lot of them have mental health issues. So, we work a lot with DEMIS, Young Adult Services. We work a lot with DDS. Yeah. We do, and therapists, and getting them hooked up with Social Security if they qualify, getting them hooked up with BRS to help with job or job coaching if they need that. We just wish adoptive families would reach out before they get to that point where they're going to say, we can't do this anymore. They're 18, they're gone. Because if we know about that, a child can actually come back into care before they're 18. If we know that, if we know an adoption is going to disrupt, we can get them back into foster care. And then they would have the support of DCF until they're 21, which is a lot better than 18.
Okay. Yeah, I actually have heard that.
Yeah. So, yeah.
All right. Well, it's really good to know that these resources are here at least. And I mean, I imagine that a lot of adoptions go very well too.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
What we want.
Yeah. And we, and you're speaking to someone who families call when something goes wrong, right? So that's what my,
it's like being at the STD clinic. I'm just like, does everybody have chlamydia? But no, absolutely not. Just the people who need the treatment.
Right. Exactly. Right. So, but we're so grateful that families call and say, I need help, because we want them to get help, right? We don't want them to give up, and we don't want the child to have another loss. So if there's something we can do, whether it's, find a therapist, go back to DCF, ask for more money to buy a certain service, advocate in the school to make sure the child gets what they need in school, provide psychoeducation to families and other people working with their child, we do it. We're very creative. I mean, there's very few things that we can't try, because we're funded by DCF, but we don't, we can be as creative as we want, basically.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to open it if anybody in the audience has questions.
Sure.
But also okay if you're all a quiet audience.
I have a quick question.
All right.
Sure.
So, in the event, right, that you're potentially being matched with a child who is in that kind of school age, like 5 to 8 or so, is there like a longer run-up process to like meeting them maybe having agency in the matchmaking process? Do you know what I mean? Like, as opposed to, if you've got an infant where, they don't really have a say or an understanding.
Sure.
I have to imagine if it's, 8 or 10,
yeah, like
that.
Yeah, like, do you have a couple of visits, or like a couple of visits and then overnight? So I can't speak for DCF on that, because they would do that process. And my guess is that they would say every situation is different depending on why the child is leaving one home and coming into your home, or were they just removed and they're trying to get the child into a pre-adopt placement and you're a pre-adopt home. So DCF would absolutely prefer that a child, if they are removed, that they can go into a pre-adopt home if they're pretty sure that this child can't go home. I think, sometimes when kids are removed, it's very clear that they're not going to be able to go back into that home. And it's just a matter of, we get a file with the court, petition the court to terminate parental rights. And then there's times where, maybe, the birth parent has regained custody of other children. And so they're, hopeful that he or she will be able to regain custody, of the child. So I would say, depending on the child's circumstances, would depend on how quickly or slowly or planfully that placement or visits would happen. But that is something that you would need to make sure you're really clear with your social worker about what you can and can't do and what you feel comfortable with and not. Maybe you don't want any foster placements. You just want to be a pre-adopt home. And so you don't want to take any children into your home whose either birth parents' rights aren't already terminated, or DCF's not really sure that, they're on their way to trial soon to terminate parental rights.
All right.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, it's not more clear cut and like definite. Yeah, with DCF. With a private domestic adoption, like I said, with newborn, obviously it's very different. But even if you did like a 5-year-old from through a private agency, they would still probably be DCF's children. Like DCF would be the custodian of those kids. It's very rare that, like the agency I worked for, we wouldn't take a woman who called and said, I have a 5-year-old and, I can't do it. We would have referred her to DCF just because we didn't have families who were looking for 5-year-olds. And that was just my experience with the agency I worked for.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so to wrap up, I am first going to ask that you provide information that folks with questions can contact the program at.
You can reach me directly at 860-679-4113. That's my direct line. And then our website is health.uconn.edu/adoption assistance. So, okay, perfect. So that's our website. Okay, awesome.
Awesome. Thank
Okay.
you. And again, I'm
Nice.
Kim Adamski, HIV prevention specialist at the Hartford Gay and Lesbian Health Collective. You can reach me with questions about sexual health, LGBTQ health, anything like that about our programming at kim@hglhc.org, or you can call 860-278-4163 extension 111, and I can answer your questions about those. So thank you so much, by the way, Joselyn.
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to put my email in here too.
Oh, good.
I forgot about that. Sorry about that. Yeah,
No
thank you.
worries.
And, even though we're a post-adopt program, we definitely take pre-adopt calls. So I have said these very things to people who've called, and we just try and steer them in the right direction, try and answer any questions they have about concerns. Is this the right path for us? And yeah, we're happy to field those calls too, pre-adopt side.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great. Well, have a great night, and thank you for coming
Thank
live with
you.
us.
Thank
and
you
I
so
will
much.
be recording and posting this on our social media within the next few days.
Great. Thank you.
All
Take
right,
care.
have a great night.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.